first heard about our guest speaker when I joined King's College for my A-levels. He is a Casey old boy. By the time I was doing my A-levels, he had already finished his law degree at Oxford University, and as well as his master's in law at Harvard University. He was a clerk then to the famous Justice Thurgood Marshall at the U.S. Supreme Court. So already, I mean, you can imagine this young lower sixth form student, hearing about this Nigerian who was smashing down all types of ceilings and proving that we Nigerians, should be respected in all fields of endeavor. He joined the prestigious U.S. law firm Craver, Swain & Moore. And by the time my career in banking started in 1988, he had already started making waves as an investment banker at Credit Suisse First Boston. Indeed, when we bought Access Bank in 2002, Bayo Ogunlesi was already the global head of investment banking at CSFB. He was already one of the most renowned and most respected professionals in global finance. And then in 2004, I remember reading when he was appointed executive vice chairman at CSFB, which was, just short of being the most prestigious role in global finance at the time. And then, we were preparing for him to become CEO when he chose to embark on the entrepreneurial chapter of his life, forming the PE firm Global Infrastructure Partners, where he is chairman and managing partner, and he sits on nearly $100 billion worth of assets of firepower. If there is a poster boy for financial services and related professional services anywhere in the world, I would imagine that the first name on that poster would be Mr. Adebayo Ogunlesi. Bayo, it's great to have you with us this afternoon in Lagos, morning in New York. Thank you very much for joining us.
I think it's my pleasure. And let me add my congratulations to everybody for the launch of Enterprise Nigeria. In preparing for this, I actually spoke to my good friend, Mark Tucker, who is as you know, is the chairman of the board of Enterprise City UK. And I said, what lessons can I pass along? And he was very encouraged, actually. As you mostly probably know, he spent most of his career actually in Asia. And so he thought the idea of Nigerian professionals getting together to set up an organization to advocate for financial services, advocate for professional services, but more importantly, work hand in glove, as the Honorable Minister and the Vice President said, with the government to allow Nigeria to achieve its full potential was something that was very exciting. So congratulations to all of the founding members, congratulations to OB, and of course to Aig for being the inaugural chair of this organization.
Thank you so much, Bayo. Now, we avoided describing this as a fireside chat. It could be apt for you in New York, but for me, this is an air-conditioned environment. But nonetheless, I think, warm or cool where I am, I think we're going to have a great 20 minutes conversation. Now, let me start with this established fact. If you look at your career, law, banking, asset management, entrepreneurship, then of course you've taught in school, a bit like in certain respects, even our vice president. And you think about this entire, formative journey for you. And then what you do now, which is put infrastructure in places where the world needs it. Can you tell us how your career journey has basically informed what you're doing today and the contributions you're making to the world economy and humanity?
Sure, that's a very good question. First, when you describe my career, it makes it sound like it was some plan that I came up with when I was in King's College. The fact is, most of the things that I've done have been serendipity. So I actually didn't study law at Oxford. I studied politics, philosophy, and economics, right? Because I thought I wanted to be an economist. Now, of course, for those of you who follow the plight of the UK, PPE is a subject that many prime ministers and chancellors of Exchequer, the UK, studied at Oxford, and they all messed up the UK economy. It took Margaret Thatcher, who actually studied chemistry at Oxford, to figure out how to run the UK economy effectively. So that tells you a lot about what PPE prepared for. then I thought I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. So if I said, if you want to be a corporate lawyer, you should apply to law school in the US because most corporate lawyers are American trained. So I applied to Harvard. What I didn't know was that at the time, Harvard actually did not really admit into the law school, at least the regular JD program, people who are either not Americans, Canadians, or hadn't gone to university in the US. Why they admitted me, I didn't quite know, but I think I found out after the fact. Remember, this was in 1975, right? After the first Arab oil embargo, oil-producing country Nigeria. So Harvard, in its far-sighted vision, thought, well, we'll admit this Nigerian guy. He'll get, go back to his country, get rich, and then he'll donate lots of money to Harvard Law School. And of course, 20 years later, Justice Kagan, who when she was dean of the law school, came to see me and told me that she had come to collect. If you follow Harvard, you will see that there is no Ogunlesi Hall at Harvard Law School. So I think they may have made a mistake in doing that. But having gone into the law school, I decided to apply to business school. And the reason I applied to business school was I said, well, look, if I'm going to have corporate people as my clients, I might as well go and study with them. And, maybe if I'll do better than them, they'll be forced to hire me as a lawyer because I'll tell them, look, I'll tell everybody I did better than you in business school. But, so I did this JD MBA program. And then, as you said, I clerked to the Supreme Court. I went to Cravat. And actually, the reason why I ended up in banking has to do with Nigeria. I was working with Cravat when one day I got a call from Hakeem Belosage. Hakeem had gone back to Nigeria. We'd been at Oxford together, or at KC together. And he'd gone back to Nigeria and was then the Assistant Minister of Petroleum. And the Nigerian government was looking for advisors for the LNG projects. And so Bonny LNG. So I said, oh, why don't you go talk to all these investment banks? So CSFB gets hired. And then they discover that Cravat actually has this Nigerian friend, a lawyer, who's a friend of their clients. So they call up Cravat and say, well, can Bayo come and work on this assignment as a consultant? So I said, all right, I'll do it for a few months. And when I got there, they discovered I had an MBA and knew how to read financial statements and say, well, wouldn't you rather be a banker than a lawyer? And they would do something like, we'd have a meeting. The lawyers would go back to the office to draft documents. The bankers would take the client out to dinner. And they say, well, what would you rather do, draft documents or take clients to dinner? So, of course, I prefer to take clients to dinner. And so I joined Credit Suisse First Boston at the time. I thought I would stay a few years. I actually ended up staying 23 years. And as you said, 15 years ago now, which seems like yesterday, we started GIP. And I think all of the things I've done along the way, most of the time I was at Credit Suisse First Boston, what I did was actually advised companies, governments. One of the things I did also was on infrastructure projects and infrastructure investments. So I figured, well, why don't I go and become an infrastructure investor myself? And when we started GIP, I actually went to see Henry Kravis, who ran KKR, and asked him for advice. He said, I have two pieces of advice for you. He said, the first is just remember, anybody can buy a business, okay? You just have to pay more than the next guy. So it's not when you buy a business that you celebrate. It's when you sell it at a profit. So I said, well, that sounds like good advice. He said, the second piece of advice I have for you is, he said, look, there is no substitute for experience in the investing business. And I remember thinking at the time, well, what's he talking about? This is not that complicated. I've advised on, almost $1 trillion of M&A transactions, all of that. And, 15 years later, I had dinner with Henry the other day. And I said, Henry, you won't remember this, but that was the best advice you ever gave me, because in fact, there is no experience. There's no substitute for experience in these things. So, the career has been interesting. It hasn't been planned, but what I'd say is, and my advice to young professionals is, there are lots of times in your career where opportunities present themselves that involve some measure of risk. Don't be afraid to take risk, right? When I went from law to banking, it was a risk. There was no guarantee that I succeeded banking, but I thought it was interesting. And, so I was, somewhat successful. When we went into the investment business, again, there was there's no guarantee that I would be successful in it. But again, it's sort of worked out well. And I think I see too many instances of people who have opportunities and are reluctant to take advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you, Bayo. Fascinating. And indeed, actually, one of our programs, our first programs and initiatives as EnterpriseNGR is a national internship program. And the whole idea is for the young Nigerian man or woman to be exposed in the same way that you were, Bayo. And hopefully we will have several Bayo Ogunlesis in male and female form, doing great things in Nigeria, for Nigeria, and of course for the world. Now, I think that many Nigerians think about our country and say, there are many things to fix. Okay, I want us to focus in this discussion on the issue of financial services, the country the schools you went to before you left, the friends you have, and then you look at other African nations. I mean, I don't feel, neither does anybody in EnterpriseNGR feel that we're operating anywhere where we should be. What are your views on what we can begin to do to be to Europe and the world, what London is, and in Africa, to take that type of preeminent position?
Look, that's a very good question. Look, Obi said it in remarks. It is clear that Nigeria has not lived up to its full potential. In fact, I remember when I was a CSFP, I used to do some work in a number of other African countries. And I remember going to Botswana. And, but small country, very successful economically. And the president at the time, he said, I've been thinking about something. I said, what is it? He said, well, I've been thinking about the fact that there is a God. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you look objectively, you think God was unfair because he put most of the resources in Africa in Nigeria. He put most of the people in Africa in Nigeria. He said, but the reason that I've concluded that God is fair is because he put Nigerians in Africa. And Nigerians are a notoriously hard group of people to corral and to push in the same direction. I think the first thing that EnterpriseNGR should do is advocate for the creation of a very, very strong financial system in Nigeria. Obviously, Nigeria is very blessed with the fact that, through the leadership of people such as as the chairman, we have a very strong banking system. And the Nigerian banks have been very successful, or more or less successful, in expanding in other African countries. But it takes more than a strong banking system to have a strong financial services system, because, what does it take to be successful in the financial services system? It has to attract capital and make it easy to match, users and providers of capital. I think one of the challenges that people have in Nigeria is that is not an easy thing to do. The foreign exchange system is a little bit opaque. The insurance services system is not as strong as it should be. And I think one of the keys, I think Nigeria will never achieve its full potential unless it has a very strong and robust financial services system. And I think in thinking about this, the thing we need to remember is Nigeria is in competition. Okay, competing for resources, we're competing for capital, we're competing for talent. And as a global investor, there's nothing that says I have to invest in Nigeria. If I was in the oil industry, maybe I have to invest in Nigeria. But absent that, I just don't. I look for places where I can generate the most attractive returns for my investors. Okay, and so Nigeria has to make it very clear to the world that we're open for business. Now, the exciting thing about Nigeria today is I was in a meeting with the CEO of I think it was Microsoft, who had just come back from Nigeria. I think this was pre-COVID, and he said he was incredibly excited. I said, "Well, why are you excited?" He said, Nigeria is one of the I wasn't even aware of this, the most interesting places in terms of the development or the nascent development of software and tech services industry. The CEO of YouTube Music is a good friend of mine. He was in Nigeria just pre-COVID. Again, he came back and he said, look, the Nigerian music scene is incredible. So we have all of the potential, and the thing we need to do is to put it together. And I think what EnterpriseNGR can do is be an advocate to government, be a powerful voice or providing advice, sometimes lobbying to make sure that we continue to move in the right direction. And I think with all of the talent, I see you have 600 people on this session, which I think is incredibly exciting, and I think it augurs well for the future of EnterpriseNGR, but more importantly, for the things that we can get done from Nigeria.
Bayo, whilst you say that you don't invest in Nigeria, or there are no headline investments, I see a wonderful Nigerian artwork behind you, Yusuf Bello. So we know that the art space in Nigeria feels your dollar power.
Absolutely. Actually, my wife and I, we only invest in contemporary African art, and most of it is either Nigerian or Ghanaian, and some places in South Africa.
Fantastic. Please keep investing. You know, there was this headline, I loved it, the Nigerian who bought Gatwick Airport. That was, our headline when you did the deal. Just for a minute, right, for our audience, could you just kind of, put us into the mind of the deal maker, what these, big deals, really involve, and the role that lawyers, accountants, and bankers and financiers and asset managers play in all these things?
Right. I mean, we started laying the groundwork by, we bought Gatwick in 2009, and we sold a 50% interest in it a couple of years ago. So we still continue to manage it with Vansi. But we laid the groundwork for buying Gatwick in 2006. When we made our first airport investment. We bought City Airport, which is a small airport in the financial district in London. And the reason we bought City Airport was because we thought if we ran City Airport well, when it was time to get Gatwick or to offer to buy Gatwick, the airlines would actually be advocates with the UK government because we're not known as an airport operator. The reason we knew Gatwick was going to be for sale was Gatwick at the time was owned by the same group that owned Heathrow, and the UK competition authorities had said they had to sell one of the two. So we ran City Airport well, and indeed, when we made the offer for Gatwick, it was actually BA, Lufthansa, Swiss. They were the strongest advocates for us doing that. But unfortunately for Ferrovial, who was the principal shareholder, they were forced to sell Gatwick in 2009, which was obviously in the midst of the financial crisis. So they decided to run an auction, and GIP was the only person that showed up. So I remember flying to Spain to meet with Rafael Del Pino, who was the chairman of Ferrovial. I met with him on a Sunday, and I made my offer to him in Madrid. And he said, he was very visibly angry. He said, "You wasted my time. You made me leave my weekend place to fly to Madrid to meet with you for this insulting offer." And he went on and on and on and on. I said, "Well, look, this is the offer, and run your process, see if you can get a higher price." Unfortunately for him, nobody was willing to invest money at the time. So when he came back to us, we actually reduced our price, and he was forced to sell it to us. And we've since I think we've done a decent job running Gatwick. And when we sold it, I think we made something like 10 times the money we invested in it. So it was a pretty successful investment.
Fantastic. The art of the deal, and in your life also, art is a big deal. I truly admire you, Bayo, for many reasons. I think we've had these discussions about society values and things like that. You chaired the AFC, where I was a non-executive director at our very early stages, helped to build the foundations of what is today, one of Africa's premier financial institutions. If you were to just speak to a young Nigerian about character and about the way they should model themselves, how would you, express these thoughts to my son or daughter, or anybody in that matter for their future?
Sure. Look, I think the very thing that is most important is character. I remember somebody once, saying to me, he said, when you think about what you do you want it to be on the front page of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or the Financial Times? And if it is, would your mother or your father be proud of you, okay, or satisfied with what you've done? And I remember, the hardest thing I ever had to do was to explain to my parents. My father's a professor of medicine, my mother ran a school. So they had no real familiarity with financial services business. And when I was working at Cravath, they understood that. When I told them I was going to CSFB, I remember my mom saying to me, "So are you going to be a teller in a bank?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, okay, are you going to be a commercial banker?" I said, "Oh." And so she said, "What on earth is this investment bank thing?" And I tried to explain it, and she still couldn't get it, and I still couldn't get it. And when they finally ran the story about us buying, and of course I'd left CSFB at the time, when they ran the stories about us buying Gatwick, she called me up and said, "Oh, now I understand what it is that you do." So I had to do something completely different for her to understand. But look, I think in all things, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be true to your own values. You have to remember what's important, and you have to be grounded. I think you have to be serious in what you do, but I don't think you shouldn't take yourself too seriously, because I think if you take yourself too seriously, you'll run into trouble. I think you should certainly not leave any of your own PR. In fact, I think one of the things I've enjoyed, I've been married to my wife for 36 years. And when we got married, I said to her, the day you find out that I'm starting to believe my own crap, I'm going to sign a piece of paper where you can get me committed to a mental institution or some other place, so that I can always remain grounded. I think it's very important that you remain grounded. Look, there are lots of people who are talented who don't succeed. You have to work hard. I think that goes without saying. But you also, more than anything else, you have to be willing to take risks, and you have to be willing to challenge yourself. You have to be willing to do what Aig has done, right? Aig had a very successful career running one of the premier banks in Nigeria. He stepped down when he thought it was time, so he could do something else. And I think it's important that you keep reinventing yourself and keep developing and learning and growing, because otherwise, things are not, you'll atrophy. And I think that's important to do as an individual. Anyway, long-winded answer to your very simple question.
Thank you, Bayo. And you have shown the world that the ability of an individual to reinvent themselves for good, really rests in their own hands. Thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. Thank you for imparting very strong words of wisdom, particularly, don't believe your own PR. And, God bless you. One ask by EnterpriseNGR. We will be coming to the US as part of our advocacy and market expansion efforts. You will promise to host at least one event where, you will call all your friends who are the high and mighty in global finance and beyond, to listen to us. Is that a promise we can hold you to?
Yeah, that is certainly a promise you can hold me to. I remember the last time I did something like this was when OBJ was president, and he came to Nigeria, and we hosted. We brought a whole bunch of CEOs, and it was very interesting. His message to all of these CEOs was, Nigeria is open for business, and I think it is important that we continue to send that message across the globe, that Nigeria is open for business, that it's a place where you can do good business, that it's a place that has talented individuals, that has resources. And if His Excellency the Vice President and the Minister of Finance are still on, I would encourage them to make it easier to do business in Nigeria for international companies. If we do that, I think Nigeria has boundless potential. I continue to be very encouraged by young Nigerians that I meet in the US who are unlike me, and I think this is the hope for Nigeria. Are determined to go back and to turn the place into the true realization of what Nigeria can be. And I think EnterpriseNGR is an incredibly important step in doing that. And so I salute all of you for what you're doing, and I would be very, very happy to support in any way that I can. So thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure. And have a good afternoon, have a good morning for those of us in the US, good evening if you're in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adebayo Ogunlesi. Words of wisdom, gems, pearls. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you, thank you, thank you.